You're listening to the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox Podcast, the podcast that keeps your practice sharp and your clients happy. I'm your host, immigration lawyer John Khosravi, and every week we're bringing you insights, tips, and real-world conversations with top immigration attorneys and industry leaders. Whether you're here to grow your practice, stay on top of the latest trends, or get inspired, you're in the right place. Ready? Let's go. 129 of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox Podcast. It's a really neat one. It's going to be different. There's a podcast, or it's not a podcast, it's a YouTube channel I ran into a month ago, and it was an author, was a host that is in the financial space, Nick Pardini. I'm going to interview him right now. In particular, he had one subject he did about the U.S. class system. I thought it was really interesting. Then I started binge watching a lot of the stuff he did. I thought it was an interesting perspective to bring with his understanding of finances. Not something I heard of or seen before. And so I'm like, you know what? Reached out to him and said, hey, could you come on my show and talk about this class system that exists in the US and where immigration lawyers fall into it? Everyone's always, it's money and power and all that kind of stuff, class. So it's always a fascinating one. Obviously, that one show about the castle in England, I never watched it, but I don't know what it was called. What was it called? You probably know what it is. It's like these people in England Castle from 20 years ago are talking. It's popular. It was popular, I guess. They just have a movie that come out recently. But class stuff always interesting people. So I thought I'd come on, explain what his interpretation of the U.S. class system is, which is different. It's not necessarily about your salary or income. There's all the other factors come in. He's going to break it down, and we talk about a bunch of different stuff. So I really want to thank Nick for coming on. I think you'll enjoy this different kind of, different kind of tone, a different kind of thing to talk about rather than pure immigration law. Hopefully, I get more guests like this that have interesting things to say. I just got to reach out to them and find people that are neat like that. But if you need people, I have bring something different, let me know, and we can take from there too. Speaking of neat things, I want to thank our sponsor, E-Immigration by Serenade. You've already heard about them, and you should keep hearing about them because they're doing great work supporting immigration lawyers with their partnership in the AI sector, free monthly seminars they're doing, and frankly, this wonderful ultimate immigration software buyer's guide that they had. That's kind of exactly what I wish I had when I was shopping for my firm system, with real comparisons of the features that actually do move the needle. Head to get.immigration.com/resources to grab your copy and pick a case management software like a pro. That's get.immigration.com/resources, because picking the immigration software that you need case management is so important, especially if someone's keeping up to date, including AI, including updates and online filing and a host of stuff. And I just did an interview with the general manager of the immigration talking about all the new things that are coming out this quarter. It's mind blowing. Definitely check it out. I think it's going to come out soon, next couple of days. We're finalizing it. We publish. Definitely something to listen to, whether you're already using Immigration Serenade or using another company. It's good to see what's out there, to see what you could demand from your company, or just make the switch, whichever it is. It's always good to keep up to date, because the technology is what's going to separate a lot of immigration law firms in the near future, who are going to be able to function at a better cost and better service to their clients. So I want to thank you for doing that and supporting our magazine, issue number 10 of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox Podcast. I'm sorry, magazine, which is out right now. Go to immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com to see that. And join us on our free community page for U.S. immigration. Now, again, I say U.S. immigration lawyers, U.S. lawyers. You can check it out. Go to, again, immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. Click on the community tab. Fill in your information there so we can check your bar number and get you in to join the community page. A lot of information, videos, training, all that kind of stuff, including our premium courses that are there too for purchase. Our flagship program, the Marriage Green Card course, that's really going to change your life. We had so much demand last week about it. People reaching out, a lot more students coming, mentorship, and really just have a different relationship with the practice, see how I'm living the life, and you could do it too. That's immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com, and just click on the community tab. And if you want more information about our courses, we have a course page there. You can see it as well. Having said all that, none of the information provided here is intended as individual legal guidance or financial guidance. Please consult with an immigration attorney about your case, but y'all know that already. Let's get the show started. Hi, Nick. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. So let's start off going to your background and what you do. Just a little background from my end. I've watched your YouTube channel, and you had some interesting topics. One thing led to another that a binge watch happened, or I've watched like 100 hours of your stuff at this point. A lot of people listen to my podcast tell me the same thing. So it's surreal for me, like being on the other end of it to experience. But it's great to talk with you in person. And you had a really interesting chart that first caught my attention about the class system in America. I thought it'd be interesting for immigration lawyers to hear, lawyers in general. But why don't you start with your background, where you're from, and what kind of work you do?
My name is Nick Pardini. I am the co-founder and portfolio manager at a wealth management firm in Newport Beach called Spearhead Advisors. Prior to that, I was an analyst or a portfolio manager at various hedge funds, and also ran my own independent macroeconomic research firm. I started the YouTube channel Analyzing Finance with Nick as kind of a place to discuss my more esoteric ideas that were not actionable trades. And it kind of took a life of its own where I share my thoughts on things such as global macroeconomics, finance, social class hierarchies, and why a lot of the things that go on in markets and the economy matter to my viewers.
Quick question as a side note. When I graduated from law school, I was studying economics and finance on my own because I got so interested in it. It was in 2009 ish. So it was the whole crash and everything. And I got a interview at Merrill Lynch at the time, or Merrill Edge, or whatever it was called. And to kind of do analysis, what stocks are good, this and that. But there, the focus of the person interviewing me was like, how much money can you bring in? Like, I need, 5 people that have a minimum net worth of this much. Uh, when you say analyst or portfolio manager, how much is it reviewing stocks and trades and what good investment is, and how much is it management? How does that all work out?
Okay, so if assuming you're not running your own business, there's a lot of different corners to finance. There are deal makers, like people like investment bankers, traders, um, brokers, etc., where they are just trying to facilitate transactions between a buyer and a seller in some way, shape, or form. It comes in a variety of different ways. And then there are people who are money managers who have more longer term relationships with their clients and are the ones who are making investment decisions. This could be hedge funds, this could be private equity, this can be a mutual fund or a traditional asset, long only asset manager or a wealth manager. And I'm most of my career, I was the person who was doing research to find good ideas for the portfolio managers on my team to put on as trades for the firm or to find the places where risk was mispriced. Either the risks of the market were overstating a problem, which created a buying opportunity, or the opposite, where risks were understated by the market, which created an opportunity to either hedge or be more cautious or get out of a position. So that is kind of what I did. And then I'd also, when I was a portfolio manager, I would not just do research and analysis. I would be the one actually putting on the positions and managing the risk and trading it myself. Um, Now that I run my own firm, it's kind of a hybrid. Because as an entrepreneur, as you probably know, your job isn't just simply practicing law like a lot of lawyers. You have to go out and get clients. You got to do compliance. You got to do a lot of other back office and front office
Yeah.
things to make sure your business is running. And so that was the biggest adjustment when I started Spearhead is that I couldn't just rely on having some capital from a few institutions to trade, or my bosses giving me just a salary to do research and then have the traders do whatever they want with it. Like with when you're running your own business, you need to have to get clients and you need to build your portfolios really in the interest of your clients. And so that's the main difference. And what I think when you applied for Merrill, I think they wanted you to come off as an analyst, but they do try to recruit a lot of young people to mainly be junior salespeople to train them to build a book of business because a lot of these larger firms are more asset gatherers. Like their goal is to get as much assets as they can and they put it in a relatively um, standard portfolio, like a 60-40 equity bond portfolio, maybe even just use like a synthetic index strategy and just to get decent returns and just grow the size of the book through more marketing focus and less on the money management focus and less on the customization focus. Whereas my firm is probably more the opposite. Like our partners are more markets focused and and the part of growing a book is just kind of part of the business you need to do, but it's not like what excites me.
Yeah. Now I got to give the disclaimer for you because always have to give for the law side. Nothing here is intended as individual legal or financial guidance. Some people know.
Yeah, nothing here is investment advice. I'm not There's no promise or expectations of any returns. Do your own due diligence or find a competent advisor to help you.
Another, I guess, question before you get to the big stuff. So, is having a YouTube channel help the underlying business? Other than you've met so many people in relationships, but have you been able to directly connect it with your business growth?
Um, it originally I started the YouTube before I started my business
Mm.
actually. So, it was originally a hobby. And until it got to a certain size, I was like, look, I'm not going to mention my real business at all on YouTube. And then the channel last year really accelerated in growth. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to hard sell people, but I'm going to let people know what I do and the way I help my clients. And if they're interested, they can reach out. And there are people who have reached out to work with me. And so it has helped me in that way. But I still try to focus on delivering quality content and do things that are fulfill my intellectual curiosity and the audience's curiosity than trying to hard sell my business on the channel.
I hear you. So let's talk about the main thing that captured attention. Is probably one of your leading videos is how the class system works.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me actually where I got the chart. I actually made it myself. So it's not really, you're not going to find it in any book or anything like that. But there's really in the United States and different societies and different countries have different class hierarchies because different societies are structured differently. Like authoritarian countries have a different class hierarchy. Emerging and or struggling democracies have a different class hierarchy, and European states that have a more generous welfare systems and higher tax levels tend to have a different class hierarchy. But for the Americans, say it's like a two-tiered pyramid. You have the bottom 3 classes are kind of the foundation, but once you get above what is the middle class, you get a divergence because the skills and the measurement of where you how you move up is very different whether you go on the establishment path, which is on the left side of the chart, or the entrepreneurship path, which is on the right side of the chart. So the bottom is the do you want me to go from bottom to top or just focus on the ones that are more relevant to
Let's do
attorneys?
bottom to top so people get a perspective of how it all goes together.
Okay, so like the bottom of the hierarchy is the dependent class. Those are people who live off of either government welfare or those who live off of the charity of others who are not their own family. So that's like the very bottom. Then the next level is the working class. Or the precariat class. Um, these are people, doesn't matter whether they have a college education or not. And that's what confuses a lot of people on this because class is not solely determined on your education or your income. But these are people who make just enough money to pay their bills or maybe a little less and fall into some debt. Um, and their income is primarily from one employer, maybe two employers if there's somebody who works two jobs to make ends meet. But they don't have like a diversified client base. So this is the precariat class. And the reason I call them that is because they're basically one missed paycheck away from being at risk of falling down to the dependent class. It's a very precarious position to be in. And this is what a lot of people traditionally refer to the working class. Like you can get by and have a decent living, but you're not going to be able to save enough to really retire comfortably or have a lot of the other historical middle class goals. Um, the third level is the middle class, and my definition of middle class is a lot different than a lot of people's. Most people define the middle class as the 25th to 75th income percentiles, where because that's technically the middle 50%, but that's assuming the middle class is automatically 50% of the population, which is, I think, much lower than that in real life.
Yeah.
But it's actually my definition is if you have a single source of income from an employer and you can save up enough money after your living expenses and taxes to be able to buy a home and at least partially help set your kids' college education expenses and be able to retire in your 60s or 70 at the latest. That is really kind of my definition of middle class. And I think depending on how you measure that, it's anywhere from 10 to 30% of the population in America is in the quote unquote middle class.
This is like eye opening probably for a lot of people to listen because growing up, I mean, just history of America, the idea was, especially after the post war boom, we have this middle class that affects things. But historically, in all history, middle class was like a slither. It's even at 10%, it's huge compared to what it actually was. And most people barely fall into this. I mean, nowadays, to be able to retire at 70 is not in the cards, even for lawyers. Like, and
I think it's more attainable than people think. And I might probably do a future video about this in a few months where I go into the math on it. But it's the problem is a lot of people want to have a retirement income that was higher than their working years
true.
income. And that's kind of where the lifestyle they want costs more than what their
I think that lifestyle
pre-retirement
creep
income
is
is
what
going to go
does it.
for.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lifestyle creep. If I had a more tamed down lifestyle myself, yeah, definitely. I hear you. Okay, so
So
that's
I
the
think
middle class.
retirement is generally attainable if you make it to that middle class level. And America, even with the recent relative decline in the middle class due to a variety of structural economic issues, is still well over 20% of the population, I still think fits in the middle class or above category, which is historically high.
Mhm.
And I did a video about the history of the middle class. And historically, the middle class in every society other than like post World War II West um, was under 15% of the population. So it's still better than it has been for most of humankind. The 1950s to the 1990s might have been an aberration for a variety of reasons.
Well, even this
And
percentage, is it potentially a historic anomaly that it's like this? Because maybe it's in America too. I'm not sure, and other countries, maybe Europe too, but chunks of the world. And any thoughts on that? To whether it's just an anomaly that, I mean, we don't know the future, especially with AI and stuff. But is it something that just
I think
popped out
that
of
living
nowhere?
standards are perpetually have gone up with technology, and there has been more economic prosperity as a result of that. But at the same time, like the post World War II era, where in the 50s you maybe had 35 to 50% of people being middle class, was an aberration because the rest of the world's industrial capacity was destroyed. There are some countries like Switzerland whose middle class is above 30% of the population, even to this day. If you have a well managed society and an economic edge that creates a valuable export industry, you can still do it. And the US and Switzerland and a few other countries have that. But it is hard, like in a world of global competition and winner take all economy built by the internet, to keep that level high. It takes a lot of personal discipline on the individual level and making sure that your macroeconomic policies don't err in a way to unintentionally sabotage the middle class one way or the other.
So this is where it bifurcates into the two pyramids from here on up.
Yeah, this is where it bifurcates, and it bifurcates more. And the key thing is that a middle class person can actually have a higher income than these people in the higher classes. Like you can be a middle class person and make 400 to $500,000 a year if you're an executive at a company and you get paid a salary, but you have really no connections to the elite. You are middle class. Like you're like there's the professional track are people who are within a certain degrees of separation from the establishment elites, whether that is the old money, whether that are like the levers of government, the top CEOs of major companies. Like they're with not maybe directly connected, but they're within a few degrees of separation that they're kind of on the track to kind of either be in that ladder or be connect or their livelihood is dependent on the institutions that dominate society to keep running the way they are.
Mhm.
So the difference between like again somebody who's working at a medium-sized business with a good salary that has no like social connections versus working at a Fortune 500 company at a senior vice president level would be like even if the SVP makes less money, he is technically a higher class just due to his relationship to the levers of power, if you understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
So what's important to reiterate is like income level and education per se don't designate the class in our society. It could be a
Yeah.
lot of the factors. Yeah, it is a lot of other
Yeah. I mean,
factors.
I think education serves as a floor, as a hedge.
Mhm.
Like if you study something that is relevant, that has some economic skill, like if you study something that is not useful and get a bad education, you get stuck in the precariat class pretty easily. But if you have an education from a prestigious enough school or a relevant enough field, that gives you an effective floor at the middle class. And that's kind of the purpose of education is you give it to your children to make sure they don't drop too low,
Mhm.
not to help them go higher, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And with that, that kind of explains kind of the motivations to going to college. Actually, it's more of an insurance policy than a growth stimulant for or investment, really. And then you have on the other side is the entrepreneurial track. And the first level of that is the independent professional class,
So really
which
quick,
is basically a small
elite
business.
is one of the pyramids, entrepreneur is another one. So elite is the system
Establishment and entrepreneur.
establishment. Okay.
And the first level of the establishment is the institutional professional class. These are kind of like like lo- like like low level senior management at companies like major Fortune 500 companies. These are people who are like working in like
Like a McKinsey
in
analyst or something
prominent
like that
NGOs,
out of school.
like a big like if you're like a guy who you just out of law school and you work at a big law firm,
Hmm.
like you're a second year lawyer at big law, this is your class, the institutional professional class. Or you're working at so portfolio manager at Citadel or something like that. This is the level. That's the level you're at. It's like so just for lawyer comparison, like if you go to one of these big law firms out of like a top law school, this is where you are. The other side is the independent professional class, which are people who are small business owners who have a diversified set of clients. So if they lose a single client, they do not lose their livelihood. They could still make a lot less than the middle class person because if you're a startup, I'm going to use law as an example because this is a legal show. You starting your law immigration law practice, you have like a solid book of clients, but just given that you're relatively new, maybe you're only netting like 100K after expenses. You might make less than the middle class lawyer who's the counsel of some small company with a 200K salary, but you are technically in a different class because your income is no longer tied to a single boss or an employer. You have more control of your time, you have more control of your income in a sense, and you are more relatively secure in the sense once you've got up to us, push the snowball a certain direction. There's more risk on this path. That's kind of the way people move up is taking calculated risks and being able to prove a value proposition, being able to be good enough at the business development side to build a practice. So, like, that's so for your audience, the difference between institutional and professional, independent professional class is the big law associate versus the guy who just hung up his shingle. Is that a clear way of explaining it?
Yeah. Hey, everybody, I'm going to jump in really quick to remind you of our free community page for U.S. lawyers. Definitely go to immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com, click on the community tab, and put your bar information so I can check you out and have you join. We've got tons of videos, hours and hours of CLEs, discussion pages, AEO decision synopsis, and a lot more to get your practice going for you to be a great immigration attorney and continue being a great immigration attorney. That is my goal, as you've seen from this podcast, from the magazine, and a lot more, is really to get you there. So again, that's immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. Go on the community page and register, and we'll get you in. Let's go back to the show. Is there overlaps between these initial groups on these pyramids as opposed to the middle class, or is middle class someone who's working as associate at a no-name firm, let's say, as opposed to someone at an elite firm or starting their own firm? Is that the difference? It's the power that
Yeah.
comes with either being the elites or having your own book of business.
Yeah. Yeah. Having your own agency versus having social connections to the elites.
And one reference about the risk factor, Nassim Taleb, he's well-known author in finance and stuff. In one of his books, I can't remember which it was, but it has a story of one brother's a taxi driver, one person who works at a bank, and the taxi driver is inconsistent money here and there, but the bank guy is working for 20 years and has a path and is more respected because he works there. But in one swoop in 2009, he could lose his job and have nothing. But the taxi guy has a book of business, has ups and downs, but it's more sturdier. It's actually like a anti-fragile. I think that's the book. It's more anti-fragile. So risks are kind of is it per se risk in the same fashion that we would think
Yeah.
about.
I mean, I think that's kind of the inherent difference. Like the institutional path is fundamentally selling volatility. Your path is more stable unless if you get axed for any
Hmm.
reason. Whereas the entrepreneurial path is going to be more rough, especially in the beginning, and it's more inconsistent, but one single loss doesn't kill you.
Yeah. Now I'm not sure
Like
if I was
that is
able to enter that elite path, but personally, like I get like a claustrophobia knowing that my future is in the hands of random people, elites that on a whim for arbitrary reasons could make a decision on me. So I always hated that. So for me, it's hard to even get a job in that kind of perspective.
well, it's the difference between having your fate in the hands of like 50 to 100 people versus one single
Yeah.
person or one single organization. And that's also why there's the pressure in corporate America to generally conform to certain ideologies or beliefs or certain social trends because if you don't really fit into the club, you are more at risk of
Yeah.
being ostracized, which can kick you out of the off the track. So then the next levels above that on each side, on the institutional side, is what I call the Ivy League class because it's not all of them, but historically these are people with Ivy League undergrads or Ivy League graduate degrees tend to be at this level. They're within 1 degree of separation of the establishment elite. Like maybe this, for example, is the president's personal counsel, or this is the doctor for the CEOs. This is where they do kind of intersect.
Yeah.
Or these are the people who are like a slightly higher ranks in corporate management or in the professional classes, whether it's government, nonprofits, corporate America, established big law firms, white shoe banks. This is like whereas the institutional professional class is the associate, the Ivy League class is the partner at the
Mhm.
big law firm.
Partner with the
So like
pedigree
that's
that's needed for that, yeah.
yeah, and the partner, the creator who's friends with a few senators in Washington.
Mhm.
Like that's kind of that's the Ivy League class.
And at this point, it's
And
kinda like the elite, the percentages is like, is this top 1% here or different?
yeah, we're getting into the top 1 to 2% at this point. And then on the other side, yeah, is the same, like the successful business owner class, which is definitely in the top 1% or less. These are people whose business has gotten big enough that they generate a life enough money to give themselves a life of luxury. Like they can afford to live in like a Beverly Hills or a Newport Beach without having to worry about prices for things. And they can afford to hire somebody to manage all of their operations. So they are basically they can live a life like a semi-retired person, but they've built the business big enough that it kind of can run itself. And it's not and while it does that, it pays them enough income that they can live a very good life. I usually use $1 million a year as the benchmark, but it could be more or less depending on where you live.
Yeah.
So if you can make $1 million your net profit after delegating all your responsibilities, you are in the successful business owner class. And yeah, that's like the top half a percent of people really in the United States.
It
Um,
there's so much going on. So this is the class that most people have access to if, they put it together enough. Running a business, I have a small business is impossible enough. But in one sense, I would expect the numbers to be a little large on there. But at the same time, knowing how hard it is to run a small business like I am, like it's
well, that's 1 million in net profit. That's not just
that's
revenue.
true.
So, like, and that's what you pay yourself after all your employees and hiring somebody to basically replace you as the manager of the firm. So
Being a
that's
kid,
a pretty big
as
level.
a millennial, we were promised that that's going to be your lifestyle when you're growing up. Like, oh, you don't I'll just go to school and that's going to be it. But then you realize the reality is like, no, this is like a more complex kind of thing. And it's a lot more going on to get there.
Yeah, I think that's generally people's aspirations in America realistically. You could with just hard work and persistence, you could advance one class up above where you were born. With a little bit of like fortune on your side, you could advance probably 2 classes. 3 plus classes in one generation is a little bit
Yeah.
unrealistic. Like, as somebody who was born in an independent professional class family, my goal is to get into the successful business owner class.
Mhm.
Like, for me to get to the counter elite, it's possible, but I'm gonna need some luck on my side because I'll explain why when we get to the counter elite class is. But the counter elite class essentially is the top of the independent professional class. That's when somebody has a net worth of above 50 million plus a property that they own, and they have enough money that not only they don't have to work, but they can influence the society and the bigger system without being within the establishment. Like example, this would be somebody like an Elon Musk or a Peter Thiel or a Joe Rogan or
Patrick Bet David
like
as a value team. Yeah.
yeah, those kind of people. People who have enough money that they can build their own platform or donate enough to politicians that they're basically forced to work in your interest. Like that kind of scale. Like if you're in the crowd that can own a private jet with and or have basically enough money that your investments, not even your business, your investments alone generate enough that you can have that lifestyle without ever having to worry about going back to work, or your children going back to work. You're a counter elite. And you can get there either by just going pedal to the metal and scaling your business really big, or selling it for a nine-figure payout or
Yeah.
more. So, and assuming you own enough of the equity that, like, depending on how many partners you have, that you'll get enough money to build that nest egg. So that's kind of that's the counter elites. Like, the low end of the counter elites are people with 50 million net worths. The high end are multi-billionaires who just for some reason were self-made and excluded from the establishment system. And people who used to be in the establishment elite who get disgraced often get kicked out and moved into the counter elite because they violated some social norms of their class they were born in. And that the top of the class period hierarchy on the institutional side is the establishment elite, which this is the only class it's not really realistic to move into. Like, there are some who do, maybe if you make it to becoming a Fortune 500 CEO, or you get elected like a president of the United States or a US senator or something like that, you might be able to get there through your own merits. But generally, these people are born into this class. These are the old money. These are people and my definition of old money is somebody who has no living ancestors who was responsible for generating the original fortune. So it has to be your great grandparents or older who are the ones who created the original wealth for your family, or they created the initial social reputation. Say, for example, you're Franklin Delano Roosevelt's great great grandson, you would be in this category. Um, or if you are like the Rockefellers, like a modern, and it usually takes about 4 generations. So, like, for a modern example, like President Trump would probably be considered counter elite before he got elected to presidency, where his grandkids would be establishment elite because his father was the one who made the fortune.
Yeah. And the counter elites, a lot of times that's why they have their children marry into these families it's kind of an arranged marriage to be able
Yeah.
to manipulate these things
Yeah. That was very common in the 19th century, where a lot of the wealthy robber barons, they married their daughters into English nobility to gain prestige.
very interesting. So, obviously, these elites run the game behind the scenes. They're the deep state, if you will, the reality, like that have influence on how things operate.
Yeah. But once every 50 years or so, they get turned over. The counter elite successfully knocks them off,
Hmm.
and then it creates a new establishment elite based on different criteria. Like right now, I think we're going through a
Yeah.
transition time where the establishment elite, basically from the 1970s to today, was based on credentialism. Like, did you go to certain schools? Did you have certain connections to certain institutions? Did you have your resume working at these elite firms or these elite corners of government? And it was resume building. It was credential based, the establishment path. Now that's shifting as the world has gotten more disrupted by technology. To entrepreneurs are starting to displace them in a variety of levels, both in the business world and in the political world. And then before that, the last turnover, say like in the 1960s and 70s, we had the last turnover, and basically the whole first half of the 20th century is just basically if you were one of these old Anglo-Saxon families who were either the descendants of robber barons or the original colonial settlers. They were or the original frontier settlers for places further out west. They were the original class, and when they abdicated responsibility in the 1960s, which would be a whole other separate topic, that's when the credentialed establishment elite came in. And I think maybe in the 2010s and 20s, we are seeing the next turnover. And then probably another 40, 50 years, we'll probably see another turnover of the establishment elite. It doesn't always have to be violent. In non-democratic societies, these turnovers are usually results of revolution or coups, or like changing one royal family from another in a non-peaceful way. But ever since we've developed a peaceful transition of power, it's mainly just elections and disruptions in the business world that cause these shifts in the establishment elite nowadays.
I have a theory. I want to get your thoughts on it. So, my family's from Iran, and in Iranian history, it's just a constant cycle of one king coming in and like taking over and being really competent. the son being so, the son after that not so much, and the fourth one just belligerent, has no connection to reality, living the harem, having fun, and they
Yeah.
destroy the secessions, and a new king comes in, new like system comes in, they overthrow it. And potentially what's going on right now is the elites we have that shepherded America in the last 50 years, they're dying off, and then their children come, or maybe their grandchildren, and they're rich, but they have no connection where, like, for example, counter elite have to, like, be part of the people to a certain extent to realize what's going on to move up. Once they become elite, have kids, grandkids, the grandkids are detached from what the people are doing, what they need. And then that's why the norms that they set forth in a society, which I believe the elites kind of behind the scenes set forth, like what the social norms are, things. A lot of it, as you have things, it's both the dependent class and the established class. Both of them have an effect on the culture. But the decadence that comes from that essentially breaks down, and where we have a new set of elites have to come in. Hopefully they'll be smart, maybe not, but I think we're right now in the process of these new elites coming in, and then hopefully they're good for the people, but more larger numbers. Maybe they're not. Most of the time they're not historically, in some form or fashion. But does that theory kind of resonate at all, or what are your thoughts?
To a certain degree, I mean, I think it basically that's why it's so hard in general for families to preserve money for more than 3 generations. And this is something when I talk to my clients about who have these kind of issues, they're like, how do I make sure my kids don't um, blow all the money once they inherit it? How do I make sure that my future descendants, grandchildren, and beyond adopt the right values to be good stewards of capital and be good examples for society? This is I think in the age of more information, I think it's going to be easier to keep that, but at the same time, you also have more distractions and reasons for people and not to, and also more progressive taxation, which makes it harder to preserve wealth. So I can argue it on both sides, but the general idea is that I think that is true to a certain degree. When you get too disconnected from the roots of your success, it creates an inevitable failure. Some of it is just due to mathematics. Like, say, for example, that first king had 5 kids. Each of his kids had 5 kids. And I'm using such big numbers because wealthier people have significantly higher birth rates.
Mm-hmm.
And then your next generation maybe has only 3 kids each. It's still, you have like multiple double digit great grandchildren, and they're all fighting for the same fortune, especially since investments weren't as sophisticated and people weren't as financially literate in investing in those old days of the Persian kings. You're now dividing the same pie with more mouths to feed,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of what creates some of these problems. The second that can be solved in the modern day by just people compounding their investments enough so that the original nest egg grows big enough to split generation by generation. But the second thing that really causes the problem is just by enough generations, especially assuming that like these next generations are less likely to have the same aptitude and personal qualities that led to the success of the founding family, particularly if they marry outside their social class or of people who do not have the same values or aptitudes that they did. And so therefore they may like by the time you have 3 or 4 generations down, it's not really the same um, caliber of person who would be running it that in the
Mm-hmm.
past. And then there's also just the incentive structure of people who are born with everything, um, and don't really need to work for it, don't really realize the responsibility that they have. And so they live a little bit more too loose with their money and end up making major financial mistakes. Like I highlighted this in one of my videos about the 5th generation heir of Hermes who had his financial advisor steal up to 15 billion of Hermes stock from him under his nose because he didn't really bother to pay attention to or manage his personal finances in a more direct manner.
And everyone you meet at that point, like when you're part of these elites, you can't trust friendships for what they are. I mean, there's always incentives, and even if people are real people, eventually there's just so much money and power involved that it distorts all relationships that we normally would have had because we wouldn't have these kind of incentives.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's why if you are in that level of tier, you need to downplay your lifestyle to a certain degree. You should come off as somebody who makes 200 to $500,000 a year as your public figure, even if you make more than
Mm-hmm.
that, because that's enough to prove that you're respectable, but not enough that people are going to try to um, take advantage of
Yeah.
you.
I mean, literally, they could like kidnap you and hold your ransom. That kind of stuff would happen, especially back in the day. These bigger families, the famous ones, would have the Rockefeller people would have people kidnap their family members and hold them hostage.
Yeah, I mean, that even happened with the Hearst
Yeah.
family in the 70s.
Well, crazy situation. Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you so much. I definitely will get the imagery. I'll put it on there. It's everything you mentioned, like for example about the relationships, the different classes. You have videos on this I've watched. So these are all potentially controversial subjects, but it kind of naturally does make sense if you're outside your classes and you marry. Is going to be so much differences. Almost like having someone from a different language or country. That's the norms are going to be different based on these classes.
yeah, I mean, other than religion, it's probably the single biggest issue when it comes to compatibility, honestly, is your class upbringing. It's not purely a money thing, as we mentioned with the hierarchy, but you're probably going to have somebody in common, the same social class as you from another country of the same religion than you would of somebody of a different social class within your own
Hmm.
country.
There's old saying like the
And
elites of different countries have more in common than they do with the people in their own country. They're just a certain strata of the world. The problems they deal with is completely different. I remember once I hit the $100,000 mark, I felt the switch of like, oh, my life perspective completely changed. That extra income that comes in every year, and I remember it was I feel the shift that happened when I entered a different category on my own.
did you feel a shift when you went on your own?
Uh, Not as much when I went on my own. It was just when I hit the number. When I owned and made the money, I'm like, okay, like I know I can make money that's going to sustain me, and it wasn't as hard as I thought. Setting up the momentum was hard. Once I had it, I'm like, okay, I can continue making this. Now the next thing is like my lifestyle is creeping up dramatically, so how do I keep up with that train as it goes up? But I think maybe it was all the same time. I can't remember potentially. Well,
Yeah, because that's when I noticed it more than hitting a certain salary benchmark is when I went full time entrepreneur versus working for larger firms. Like I lost my ability to relate as much to people who worked at 9 to 5s because of just different lifestyle considerations that I don't have to consider that other people do, and vice
mhm,
versa. And that's why I base the class markers on when people notice those shifts. So, like the breaking into the 100K is kind of like the move from the precariat to the middle class.
mhm,
And going on your own is moving from the middle class to the independent professional class. And hiring a manager to replace your job is the benchmark that moves you to the next level. And those breaks are kind of at these major shifts, and that's why the hierarchy is structured the way it is.
yeah, they probably happened at the same time. It was like 15 years ago when I started. Maybe I just kind of forgot. But it was totally worth it. I remember when I left my job, it was like I was like worried and stuff, and I wasn't getting paid well at all either. But it was just nerve wracking but I remember like I don't know if I talked about this before on my show, but The Office, the show The Office with that was funny show with Steve Carell.
Yeah.
I was when I was
Yeah.
growing up in high school, whatever it was showing that, I thought, okay, get a job, work for somebody, have a living. But I started watching that show and I saw the salespeople who live based on commission were more successful and have more opportunity than the people who are just 9 to 5 at the accountant's desk or something like that. And that show made me want to. One of the main reasons why I started. My dad was a business owner, so it's probably naturally inclined to be the entrepreneur. That
Yeah.
really like broke my fear of sales and doing it. I'm like, yeah, there's more power and independence in that lifestyle, which is something I yearn for. Really, the independence. And I that show for some you wouldn't think a comedy show did that, but I thought I shared like it was that this dip bifurcated like the people who are in the back office as opposed to these I forgot the people's names with funny guys that are the main characters, and I realized that's what I got to do to just get out there, get business, talk with business, and do it. Is to make the biggest deal. Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on. If you want to reach out to you, what's the best way they can do that?
All right. Like you could find me on my YouTube channel, Analyzing Finance with Nick, but the best way to contact me is to go to my website, nickpardini.com, where you can fill out like a contact form. You can also email me, and the email address is available via YouTube. And though those are kind of the best ways to reach out to me is through my website or via email through my YouTube channel or other
I
means.
appreciate it. We'll have the info in the show notes, so and my staff member, team member will confirm with you. But thanks. Yeah, stick on the line for a minute or two so we talk about extra. But again, thanks for coming on. A great episode.
Hey, you're welcome.
Right, right. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Nick, for coming on the show. A different pace of things we're talking about, but I thought it was interesting to learn that, and it kind of made sense. This different way of looking at class structure, and if you watch his YouTube channel, he goes over different countries in Europe and stuff. All this is different. Tax structures are different that have different effects. But it's a fascinating thing to think about because you're always wondering like who's running this game, and he really gets into the details of who's actually running this game and where we fall within it. When I look at this pyramid, if you will, I think I'm probably in the sweet spot of not being in the elite because there's a lot of responsibility there and people trying to when you're on top of the pyramid, everyone's trying to pull you down, and you're at the bottom of the pyramid, everything's falling on you. So you don't want that. The middle is a good spot. I always thought like if you're thinking about like IQ or something like that, you don't want to be in the middle too much because it's too competitive. But at the same time, those people that are like, genius level IQs 150 or 160, a lot of times you go nuts. And primarily because you're in a society where everyone's essentially dumber than you are. And it gets very frustrating hanging out. Everyone's dumber than you are. So it's like, I'd rather be a little bit smarter than the crew, but not too much. Just I could fit in well enough where I can see the mistakes we are making, but at the same time, not be like judgmental on people because I realize how, bad I am myself to keep it mentally modest, but and humble. But it's so interesting to see how this stuff works. And definitely check out his podcast. Really interesting, different opinions, controversies, all that kind of stuff. But it's good to see different ways of thinking that not the typical generic stuff that they put out there. So thanks so much for listening. Join our community page, immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com, registration on the community tab, and check out the magazine, immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. I've said it a million times. Please leave a review on Spotify so we get up in the rankings, and I guess I'll leave you with that. God bless, be safe. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. If you like this episode, follow us on Instagram. Our handle is Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, where we post the latest statistics, tips, and more. And stay tuned for more from the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox podcast.